This is a whole body exercise routine that helps you feel into your pelvic floor as you are healing in postpartum. That gives you an idea as to if you have a tight pelvic floor or if the pelvic floor isn't tight but may be weak. This helps you identify some of those areas that you may need to work on a little bit more. So we're going to start on our hands and knees. And you are going to turn your feet out just slightly, and then you're going to rock back. And you're going to inhale as you rock back, exhale to come back into an upright position. So inhaling, exhaling. And don't feel like you have to sit all the way back to the floor. We're going through a comfortable range here, and you want to do about 10 to 20 of these. And feel what's happening in the bottom of your pelvis and in your hips. Do you feel tight? Does it not feel like much? Do you feel like there's a lot of strain in your arms and in your shoulders when you're doing this? Do you feel like your belly is pushing out? All of these are clues to where you may need to do a little extra work. Once we have done those, we're going to bring our knees back together, and then we're going to roll onto our backs. If it is uncomfortable for you to lie on your back with your knees bent, you can always create a little bit of an incline for you by putting some blankets or some pillows underneath you so that you are raised up and in a more inclined position. Otherwise, lying flat on your back, place your hands onto your pelvis, and what we are going to do is we're going to do some pelvic movement without moving our legs. And so what we want to do is we want to tip our pelvis forward as if we are spilling water over our pubic bone, and then we're going to tip our pelvis back as if we are tipping or spilling water through the back of the pelvis. And you want to go through these motions in a controlled manner, in a smooth manner. It might not feel smooth. And again, find where if it may feel either tight or stiff, or you might move through it really easily. And you will notice that your spine moves with it, and that's okay. And once you've done about 10 to 20 of these, again, you're doing it to feel how things are doing in your pelvic floor. Do you feel a pressure? Do you feel a tightening? Do you feel a releasing? Is it really hard to move through this? And those are all clues as to if you need to do some extra work. Then you're going to settle into the neutral position, and we're going to do some circles. So again, this is pelvis moving on legs. We don't want a lot of leg movement with this. So if you get a lot of leg movement with this, bring the motion of your pelvis into a smaller range. So we are going to tip the pelvis off to one side. Notice how my legs did not move. Then I'm going to roll to spill the water over my pubic bone. I'm going to tip my pelvis off to the right, and then I'm going to roll to spill the water into my back, and I'm going to go around in this circle, allowing my pelvis to move freely without my legs moving. And if I was doing this and my legs were swaying and doing this, I am not doing it in a controlled way, and or it's giving me a clue that I've got some tightness going on in the pelvis and in the hips that I need to work on. So we're going to do about 10 to 20 of these in one direction, and then we're going to reverse direction. So you can pause and then tip to one side, the opposite side that you tipped last time, and then you're going to spill the water over the pubic bone, tipped the other way, and then spill the water into the back as you roll around in a circle. And you may notice that one direction is more challenging than another, and that's okay. Again, it's just a way for you to identify where you may need to do a little extra work. You might feel like, oh, that's tighter in my hip or that's tighter in my back. And so I want to work on that space a little bit more. So we're rolling around this circle about 10 to 20 times, and you will feel how you're making a circle around your sacrum. From here, once we have done your reps, what you are feeling comfortable with, go back to your neutral position. We are then going to bring your arms out to the sides with the elbows bent. From here, the first thing that I want you to do is identify if when you bring your arms out to the side, if your ribs lift off of the floor. If your ribs lift off of the floor, then you may need to straighten your elbows, or you may need to prop yourself up so that your ribs can relax into the floor or whatever you're using to prop yourself up at an angle so that you can connect better to your breath. Because it's really important to connect to your breath for your pelvic floor, because your pelvic floor and your respiratory diaphragm work together. And if we pop our ribs forward, it brings us more into a shallow breath, which means we can't get deep into our pelvis with our breathing. So that's the first thing that I want you to pay attention to. Then you're going to pay attention to it as you move through the action of this exercise. So you're going to inhale as you slide your arms up. And when you are inhaling, you want to be inhaling into your back ribs to anchor those ribs into the floor. And then you're going to exhale as you bring your arms back down. And you're going to repeat this motion, really paying attention to how well you can breathe into your back ribs, how well you can control the positioning of your ribs without gripping into these abs. Because again, this motion is not a significantly strenuous action on our body, that it requires a lot of abdominal control. But if you are noticing that you have to do that, or you're gripping in these upper abs, it may be impacting your pelvic floor. And so we want, again, to work on this a little bit more so that you feel more in control of where your ribs are in position to your pelvis, and how well you can soften your belly in that new position. So again, we're going to do about 10 to 20 of these. And if you need to break them up into different sets, by all means do that. If you want to do 5 of them, take a break and do some more, do that. If you want to do 10 and then take a break and do some more, do that. Do what feels comfortable for you. We also want to make sure that you're not feeling a lot of muscle tension in your neck when you are sliding your arms up and down. This is not a neck exercise, so you shouldn't be feeling the muscles in your neck working. This is a great exercise to see how you are connecting with your ribs and your pelvis. From here, we're going to move into the legs, and we're going to see how well we can control the movement of our legs without moving our pelvis. So are we creating stability here so that we can move our legs freely from our pelvis? So what you're going to do is you're going to inhale. Again, we're going to try to breathe into those back ribs as much as possible. As you exhale, you are going to lift your one foot off of the floor, and you're going to go through whatever range feels comfortable for you. If you can only lift and keep your toes down before your pelvis starts to wobble, then that's as far as you're going to go. But if you can come all the way up into here into a 90-90 position, and your pelvis is nice and stable, you're not flattening your back, you're not popping your ribs, then you've got more control. And so we want to stay on one side to begin with and see, what is my control here? Do I feel like I'm pushing out with my belly to gain that control? Do I feel pressure down into my pelvic floor to get that control? Do I feel like, oh yeah, I am lifting in on my pelvic floor. I'm creating some flattening in my tummy without gripping, without bulging, without coning. And I am feeling nice and secure with this motion. Or, okay, I am going to just lift here because that is all I can do in this moment where I feel secure through this motion and through the connecting to my pelvic floor and to my lower abdominals. And that is absolutely okay. You can even put a stool underneath your foot and start from there. It's okay to shorten up your range and move through your baseline threshold to build up the strength and the confidence. Then once you've done about 10 of those on this side, we're going to switch off to the other leg. So again, you're going to inhale into those back ribs, creating a little bit of an anchor and connection to your ribs and the floor, which starts the connecting into your deep core. Then you are going to exhale. As you exhale, you are going to raise your leg off of the floor. Again, I'm not cueing you into contracting the pelvic floor and your abdominals, because what this is meant to do is it is meant to have you feel what is happening and take the moment to notice and recognize if you are already connecting to your pelvic floor through this movement, and you don't necessarily have to do a deeper contraction, or you feel something else going on. Like I said before, you feel bulging or coning, or your pelvis is wobbling all over the place, or you're popping through the ribs, or you're feeling pressure down into the pelvic floor. Those are all clues that we need to address something a little bit more deeper with your breathing and with your control and connection to the pelvic floor, so that you can freely move your leg without pelvis movement. That is a very important piece to healing, because we do it all the time, and we should be able to move our leg independently from our pelvis. So again, we're going to do about 10 of those on this side before we move on to the next exercise. Okay, so from here, we are going to flip back around, and we're going to get onto our hands and knees. I'm turning this way so that you can see what I'm doing with my leg. So we're going to bring one leg out to the side, and again, we are going to rock back. So we're going to rock back and come back. Inhaling and exhaling to come back up. So again, we are paying attention to what sensations we are feeling in our body. Does it feel super tight down the leg? Do you feel as you come back that you arch up through your back? It's really hard for you to stay in neutral. Do you tuck your butt as you go back? Do you feel pressure in your pelvis? All of these things help you identify where you may need to bring more attention to your exercise routine so that you can heal on a deeper level and bring the functioning of your pelvic floor and your deep core to a more confident and controlled state. So again, 10 to 20 on one side, and then we switch sides. And you may feel different from one side to the other, and that is okay. Again, it is a clue as to you might be using one side more. You may be standing in a particular way. You may be sitting in a particular way that one side of your body feels differently when you exercise it. And that's not always a bad thing. We are not as symmetrical of beings as we think we are. But if the differences from one side to the other are actually causing problems in your body because of those imbalances, then we need to address them. Again, 10 to 20 on this side. And we're going to bring that leg back in. From here, we're staying on our hands and knees, and we are seeing how well we can control our trunk with a little bit of movement of our arms and our legs. So again, from here, we want to inhale into our back, but we want to make sure that we are in a neutral position of our spine and of our pelvis. So we aren't sagging, we aren't super arched, we aren't tucking our bum. We are as neutral as we possibly can. Then we're going to inhale, and as you exhale, you're going to bring one arm up, reaching for the wall, okay? If you cannot do this without bulging, without gripping, without sagging, without a lot of weight shifting, then start to find that threshold of your range that you can do that without those other body cues that it's too much. So we're gonna go through this. Again, I'm not cueing you into contract the pelvic floor and the tummy, because what you want to do is you want to have an understanding as what your automatic response is. You want to know, okay, this is what I feel when I am not controlling, when I am just moving through it, so that I know what I need to work on. If you feel bulging, if you feel pressure into the pelvic floor, then you know I need to actually have the foresight to think, inhale, exhale, close, lift, zip, then raise my arm up. We're gonna do about 10 on this side, and then we're gonna switch sides. So again, you might notice a difference from right to left, and that may be because you are right-handed, or you are left-handed, or you hold the baby on one side, or you hold your bag on one side. So there are differences based on our habits that may show up when we are trying to exercise or do functional tasks that may perpetuate certain problems in our bodies. And we can address those just by tuning in and tapping in and feeling what's happening in our body, and taking some time to then address them. So again, about 10 on this side, and then we're moving to our legs. Just a quick note, you also you want to make sure you're not feeling your neck muscles start to really, really grip, especially when you're bringing your arm overhead, because it is not your neck muscles that are bringing your arms overhead, it is your shoulder muscles. And if you're really feeling it in the neck, we need to build up those muscles around your shoulder blades. Okay, so from here, we're going to bring one leg back at a time. Again, you want to inhale into your back body, and then as you exhale, you're going to bring one leg back. Now, again, just like with the arms, we're paying attention to how our body feels. Are you really leaning forward? Or are you reaching back? Are you collapsing? Or are you really tucking to get this action to happen? Do you feel that you're bulging in the tummy like this? Do you feel pressure in the pelvic floor? Are you leaking a little bit? Any of these things are clues that, okay, I need to intentionally contract, or you know what? Things just feel so tight, and even if I try to contract, it's still not working. So I need to actually work on lengthening my pelvic floor before I do any contracting. And that is also something that's okay. If you're like, yeah, I'm contracting, and nothing is happening, nothing is working, well, maybe it's because you actually have a tight pelvic floor, and that is why when you are trying to contract, nothing is helping. And it's not necessarily just a weak pelvic floor. That is also a really, it's really sometimes hard to decipher if it is a tight pelvic floor, because usually a weak pelvic floor can become a tight pelvic floor. And we really need to be able to decipher those two things. And that's where seeing a pelvic floor PT or OT can be really insightful as to what is truly going on at the pelvic floor level. And just like with the arms, I did not mention, if this is too much because you're having a hard time, it's really challenging, you're feeling that bulging, or you're really shifting to get this to happen, put your foot down. It's totally okay to slide your foot back versus lifting it up. That is absolutely an okay thing to do. Or just do smaller range. Absolutely okay thing to do. So from here, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually stand up, and we are going to do another move where we are trying to move our pelvis on our legs. And this is going to help us, again, feel if there is any tensioning within our hips or within our pelvis, as well as what's happening in our feet because we're standing that may be contributing to any issues within the pelvis. So in standing, we're going to bend our knees just a little bit. Place your hands right onto your pelvis so that you can feel what's happening with your pelvis. Now what you're going to do is you're going to shift your weight over to one leg. I'm shifting mine over to my right leg. Then I'm going to lift up just to have my toes in my on the mat. So I have even more weight on this right leg. And I bend my left knee even more. From here, we're going to do what I call the Beyonce, which is we bend the left knee even more, and that rotates our pelvis. Okay, and then we're going to straighten the left knee and bend the left knee, and we're rotating that pelvis on the hips. Okay, you can even go the opposite if you want to, but that takes a little bit more. So we are rotating the pelvis on the hips just by bending this left knee, and you may feel a stretch in the butt, especially if you are tight, especially if you have that heart-shaped butt where you are really using actually deep hip rotator muscles instead of your glutes to do a lot of the power behind movement. You'll feel a big stretch in your butt, or even a little stretch, but you'll feel that stretch. And this is a great way to start to improve that control and get into the proper muscles. Again, do about 10 to 20 of these. And then we're going to switch sides. And something to note is when you are coming out of this, it's really coming from you straightening your knee and versus lifting through your back. You don't want any of this. It's just bending and straightening your knee. Okay, we're going to switch. So we're going to shift our weight over to our left leg. We're going to come up onto the ball of our right foot, and then we are going to bend and straighten. And again, we are moving the pelvis on the hip, on the femoral head, which is going to stretch those deeper rotator muscles. And it's going to help us start to identify, oh, wow, that's really tight. And you know what? I might be gripping and tucking my butt to find that stability that I'm lacking from my deep core. And maybe that's why my pelvic floor is tight. And maybe that's why it's hard for me to poop. And maybe that's why I have tailbone pain. Or maybe that's why I have hip pain or knee pain or SI joint pain. There's a lot of reasons why you might have some of those symptoms. And as to why you may have created some of these habits around having this tighter, deeper butt. And this is a great way to start to identify that and then use it as an exercise to work on it. And there are great ways to progress this exercise that I'll eventually video for everyone, that helps you become more functional, because we are constantly doing that motion where we are twisting and bending and lifting and on one foot. And so I really hope that this little routine helps you identify some of the areas within your body that have the potential to be a catalyst to pelvic floor dysfunction, that if we don't address, may actually have symptoms start later on, if you're not already having symptoms. So again, I hope this little routine helps you identify some areas that you may need to work on by continuing these exercises with the modifications that I mentioned, and or by reaching out and asking for help so that you can get some more ideas on very specific exercises to address the areas throughout the body, so that then you can do a nice global exercise routine that targets the whole entire body and is much more functional.